All right, everyone, we'll go ahead and get started. First of all, I wanted to say thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us today. I know with all the current events taking place, there is a lot of uncertainty with the market, but please be reassured that if you hold alternative assets in your portfolio within a self-directed IRA, you'll be able to ride out the storm. As a reminder, NewView is non-fiduciary. We do not advocate any specific investments, and we simply provide educational content for our viewers. I am pleased to introduce Barry and Eric Sandhaus with JV Partnership, and they will be discussing how joint ventures can be structured using self-directed IRAs. Why can't I control my mouse?
You have it too.
Do we have audio now?
All right, you guys can take over.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. My son Eric here and myself, we've been working with NewView for many years now. We have done many joint venture projects. We're in the real estate industry, so today's presentation will be a little bit more geared towards real estate, doing joint ventures in your IRA account. And we've done numerous ones, and there's all different ways that they can be structured. So we're going to give you a little bit of an overview as to how you would put a joint venture together, so to hopefully take out any of the uncertainties that you wouldn't know, and we'll be answering any questions, as Brian said at the end. So let's go to the next slide. So joint venture partnerships with IRA accounts can afford individuals the opportunity to enter into arrangements with one or more individuals to invest in real estate. So in addition, the joint venture partnership can have other IRA accounts as partners. For example, sometimes we've done deals where we have a project and they have a traditional IRA, they have a Roth IRA, or perhaps the husband has one and the wife has one and they both want to join in. That's perfectly fine, because it all has to be, as long as everybody joins at the same time, that's not a problem. So you can do it with multiple. Then the non-IRA accounts are the ones that would be dealing with it. You can, which I'd have to refer back to Brian on this one, but you also can invest, as long as you invest at the same time from your personal checking account at the same time that you put in money from your IRA account. But it has to be done at the exact same time. It can't come in later, so it has to be done equally. So the rules of self-directed IRAs prohibits you from a hands-on management of real estate investing, because that's called self-dealing. So when you invest in something, it's hands-off. Actually, even when the agreements are signed, you're going to approve. If you decided to do a joint venture with somebody and you like the project and you like all the paperwork that they submitted to you and the facts and figures, you would then, whatever they're asking you to sign, you would send over to NewView, and NewView would ask you to approve it. And then they actually are the ones that are going to be signing it, because you're not signing anything, because otherwise it's self-dealing. However, with a joint venture partnership, your IRA will be a passive joint venture partner, and the management of the investment is done by the non-IRA joint venture partner. So it allows you to get involved in these type of projects as a passive partner. And your IRA can invest in many types of real estate investments. A joint venture partnership would be structured, this is just one of the ways that it could be structured, with a new LLC. Your IRA would be a member of that LLC, and the LLC will have an operating agreement that will spell out all the terms of the LLC. In other words, whatever they promise to you, what's the exit on it, how long the project will take, what is the game plan. There's different types. It might be something where they're going to fix and flip, and or you're going to buy something and keep it as a rental. Who's the management of it? Everything that, if you were going to do it as an individual in a partnership with somebody to protect you, you're a partner, except you're a passive partner, and all that'll be spelled out in the operating agreement that what the LLC would have. The LLC will, the operating agreement will also name all members that have an interest in the LLC, because that then secures you to know, and you have a copy of that. Go to the next slide. And many times the real estate is purchased in a land trust. I don't know how many people are familiar with land trust, but it's just another way of buying properties where everybody's name is kept off of the deed, so that no lawsuit happy attorney come after anybody for a lawsuit, because it doesn't show who owns it. When you buy property in a land trust, only the trustee shows up as the name, and the beneficiaries is a private individual. So at that point, the joint venture partnership, LLC, that would be formed becomes the beneficiary of the land trust. The second structure that is used with land trust is when your IRA can be the beneficiary to the land trust, and the trust document will spell out the terms. And then the other joint venture partners will also be beneficiaries to the land trust. Usually, if you do it that way, then it could be a little bit more accounting work. So we prefer to use it where there's an LLC, because then that LLC is a brand new LLC, and then all the funds come into that. And as far as recording, it's just a little bit easier. Generally, what happens is a K-1 is then given to every individual, which is at the end of the year when the LLC does its tax returns. It then gives a K-1 that you use on your tax returns. But of course, in an IRA, in a self-directed, you wouldn't be paying any taxes anyway, but we still have to provide that with you. And there's other ways of doing it. It could be, it's all a lot about a trust, obviously. You have to feel comfortable with the people that you're going to decide to go into a joint venture with, based on their background and whatever else makes you comfortable with them. But sometimes it could be where maybe you just have a joint venture agreement and there is no new LLC or a land trust being formed, and you basically enter into a joint venture agreement between your IRA account and the company that's doing it. And maybe the company is buying a piece of property in their LLC because it's already set up. They may have the credit to buy it, whatever the terms may be. So it doesn't have to be in an LLC to join you together. It can just be a joint venture agreement that would join you together. Joint venture partnerships are generally set up for a specific investment. In other words, you name the reason why that you're doing that. And some of the examples that your IRA can invest in would be rehabbing homes, where that's obviously been very profitable. And of course, that's something that if we do, unfortunately, with what's happening today, with the possibility of us going into a recession, I hope we don't, but who knows, what nobody has a crystal ball to know, then that particular investment might not be the greatest investment at this time, because there may not be any people buying. What happened in the last recession was that, yes, you could certainly buy houses very cheaply. Matter of fact, when a recession happens, you can get your best bargains in the homes that need repairing and renovating. The problem was that the banks got very stringent as far as who they were lending to. So that particular side of the business is geared on making sure that banks are lending, because a traditional buy would be where your buyer, after you finish the house, is going to go to the bank and get a traditional loan. So that's something that, is very timely, but still very profitable. Or you might be buying an income-producing properties for cash flow, and there's so many different ways underneath that. It could be also where you buy something and it needs rehabbing because you build in more equity that way, because you're buying it below retail, because when you buy something for cash flow, like an income-producing property, where the income then, whatever the shares that your IRA is getting, and that would be determined based on how much you're putting up and whether or not you're the only investor and what you've negotiated with whoever's offering the joint venture, whether it's a 50-50. It just really depends on the funds that they need to do that and how much you're putting in. But on a income producing property, there's many different ways. It could be a residential home, it could be a duplex, quad, or it could be all the way up to a 5 doors, which starts to be commercial. Some people are very involved with doing Airbnbs, which you could also get involved with that. You could get involved with buying a property and doing a student housing. It could be for an assisted living facility. So there's a lot of different ways to buy even a single family home and have it produce cash flow. Another way, which again also would really depend on the where our economy is, but right now building new houses has been extremely strong, and usually the economy of the United States is usually based on building new homes. And as far as new construction goes, there's a lot of money to be made in that, and it's usually very clean because you have a set price to build that house, and you could do it to rent, or you could do it to resell it. And another investment, which mobile home parks or commercial properties, but the mobile home parks in particular is something that is, we're not really going to go into these type of investments today. This is just more to answer questions and tell you how you can do joint ventures. But mobile home parks is probably the best investment that one can get into today because they're recession proof. It's affordable housing. Sometimes people think of mobile home parks and they think, oh my gosh, it's crime or it's low income. And that's really just bad media. You know, there was some television shows, the Trailer Trash Boys and things of that nature. But they're actually the best kept secret. If you Google on Wall Street, you know, why does Wall Street like mobile home parks? You'll find that that's one of the best investments that there is today. There's no, it's supply and demand. And most people in the United States today make, you know, minimum wage, and they can't afford to even rent a decent 3-bedroom apartment. Whereas renting of a mobile home, whether they purchase it and it's inside of a park, or the park actually owns the home and rents it to them, there's usually waiting lists to get into these parks. So the occupancy usually stays very close to 100%, and there's no competition with mobile home parks because most municipalities won't allow a new home park to be built. So you never have to worry about somebody building something nicer and newer and taking away your market, which can happen in multifamily, it could happen in self-storage facilities, it could happen in a commercial strip shopping center where they build a nicer place. So that's why we've been investing an awful lot in the mobile home parks, and I would recommend anybody to look into that, because it's really a great, and there are some funds out there, you know, that you actually can buy into a fund. But of course, with the fund, you're just going to get a, you know, straight return on your interest. It isn't as great as it would be on other things. But mobile home parks, one of the other things about them is that when you raise the rents on a mobile home, the tenants don't move, because especially if they own the house, it costs anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 for them to move that home. So if you raise the rent $25, it doesn't pay for them to move, even if it's $50 over the course of a year. They can't afford to move it because it would take them 10 to 12 years to recoup that. So whereas if you own an apartment building and you raise the rent, and somebody builds a nicer, newer apartment building down the street from your investment, and maybe they've got the clubhouse and the spa and the gym, and they offer maybe 1 month's concession, you raise the rent, your tenants are moving out on you. So you have kind of a captive audience in mobile home parks. During the last recession, self-storage facilities and mobile home parks had the least amount of foreclosures. So they really are a pretty solid investment today. And an interesting part about that is that 90% of them are owned by senior citizens who got started in this industry in the 60s, the 70s, and in the 80s. There wasn't too many built after that, more out in your outskirts. And they're retiring. They have great amount of equity in these things, and they prefer to sell them with a whole mortgage on it. And their children generally don't want them. And yet there's a lot of big players involved in it. Matter of fact, one of the wealthiest men in the world, Warren Buffett, is one of the largest, he is the largest manufacturer of mobile homes today. He also owns 2 banks that finance them. So there's a lot of big players in it, and that's why Wall Street has taken a lot of big pension funds are now coming into it, because they see how safe of a business model that mobile home parks are. So, you know, some of the other things that you could also invest in that we didn't list here would be buying notes. There are people that you could joint venture with where they'll buy notes, and they buy notes or mortgages that you can buy, and some of them are performing, some of them are non-performing, and generally they buy a combination of them. God bless you, Eric. And what happens is on the non-performing ones, it becomes very lucrative because you try to, you know, nobody wants to evict somebody or foreclose on them. And of course, when you buy them personally, there's a little bit more, hopefully, empathy that goes into them, what a bank would do. And so you work with them to try to modify the loan. Or if that doesn't work, a lot of times you can give them cash for keys, and you end up getting the house at a very, very low discounted price. Of course, the performing ones, you know, you're getting a discount of what you paid for the note. If it owes, if it pays out, let's say over the course of the time, $100,000, you might be able to buy it for 60 or 70,000. If it's a non-performing, you might buy it for 20 or 30,000 because they're a lot cheaper. So that's another way you can do it. Also, when you do, as it says on the top of the screen here, for a specific investment, it's usually for a specific time, but at the same time, it can be for, like, for example, instead of picking a particular home, you might join with somebody where you set up a fund within the LLC. The LLC gets funded, so it has funds so that it can go and, let's say, go to the auctions. And when you go to the auctions, that's something that one has to have the money immediately. And generally, there wouldn't be enough time to set up the agreement, to have Newview review it, and then for you to fund it. It takes a while to get the money out of it. And then, of course, there would be no way that you could invest at these, whether it be a foreclosure, there's tax deed auctions, there's HOAs that foreclose, there's a lot of ones online like auction.com. So you might set up a joint venture where you fund the joint venture LLC so that it has the funds to go buy homes or to buy notes. So it doesn't have to be just for a particular investment per se. It could be, a combination of them. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. And by doing this, it allows you to get involved in the real estate. You cannot manage it yourself, but it's a great investment. It's a lot safer than putting money in the stock market, real estate, because, and of course, depending on what you're doing, as I mentioned, if you do the first one and a recession comes, as long as you have the time to hold on to it, nothing's ever going to happen to the house. Actually, you can turn around and rent it, which would return. So really, it's a very safe investment, real estate. And I'm sure that many of you on today's webinar are invested in real estate, but this is just a way that you can expand. So at this point, we'll open it up to questions and answers. That anybody has any questions? Brian, has there been any that have already typed in anything that we've already gone over?
It looks like there is a question. It's from Bob Malecki, and he says, I invest in mortgage notes. What is the best way to set up the JV?
Well, if you're investing in them, have you been investing with somebody else? Or have you just been directing Newview to, somebody presents a note to you and you say, go buy it, then that's not a joint venture. But if you wanted to do a joint venture with somebody who's very involved with that because of the time or their expertise, then it really would depend on that individual. As I mentioned before, an LLC is a great way. There really isn't too many liabilities when you're buying notes because if something happens on the property, the note holder really wouldn't be sued. You don't own the property. But in other types of things, that LLC gives everybody protection of their assets because you're operating under a corporate veil. But as far as answering you with the notes, it could be the same that I mentioned before. You could form it. There could be an LLC that's formed with the non-IRA account member. That would be the management of it. You would fund it, and depending on what your arrangement is as far as the profits to be split, you could do it that way. So does that help answer your question? Let's see, I'm a current investor with my IRA. I buy tax-side liens. I also, what does it say, Eric?
Need cash certified check in under an hour. So I use checkbook IRA or personal property trust. Do you have issues with that?
No, a lot of people do use checkbook IRAs. You really have to be careful with that. That's something that you can get, 5 different attorneys in the room, and they'll all have different opinions as to whether or not you're self-dealing or not. It's definitely, from our understanding, perfectly legal under the guidelines. What's your thoughts on that, Brian?
Yeah, so checkbook control it is legal. The only thing is it puts a lot of power in the IRA holder's hands, where there's always that chance they could make a mistake where they were more hands-on on the property, or they used the money to lend to a disqualified party. I mean, there's numerous things that they can make a mistake with. So what we always suggest with anyone doing checkbook control, if they have any questions before they make any investments, to always, give us a call here at NewView and discuss what their, decisions are on the types of investments that they're going to be doing or who they're going to be lending the money to.
And that, as far as a checkbook, obviously from the example that I used before about having the speed to invest in something, whether it be notes, whether it be an auction, certainly if the IRA account holder has a checkbook, then that speeds it up. But at the same time, that same checkbook could be in an LLC that you formed with your joint venture partner, and then whatever the rules that you would want, as far as you having to approve, whatever it may be, but at least the money would still be there. But it would alleviate the possibility of you ever being accused of self-dealing. Any other?
All right, I have another question here from Jane Evans. She's asking, can we start a medical clinic and hold 50-50 in our respective IRAs? I'm going to go ahead and start with this one. Jane, so if you did structure a joint venture 50-50, it would always remain 50-50. So all expenses per the IRA and maybe the other person's using cash would always be 50-50. So if that, medical clinic needed renovations, then the IRA is responsible for 50% and the other person you went on the joint venture with is responsible for 50%. And vice versa, all the income that you generate will always be dispersed 50-50. If you wanted to use your IRA and own that commercial property, like you mentioned before, it is feasible to do it in a commercial property and structure a joint venture deal that way, yes.
And I'd like to add that, no matter what type of investment, all the ones that I mentioned before, in the operating agreement, it would spell out in the event that, as Brian said, that all of a sudden repairs or something comes along, how would that be handled? Because the last thing that you want to do is be in a position where you don't have any more funds in your IRA account, and the only way that you can do something is to put money in personally, then that's a no-no. You can't do it that way unless you were structured from the start. As I mentioned, that there is a way that you can invest personally as well as a member, as well as a joint venture member, as well as your IRA account. But a lot of times, like for example, if it's a rental and a repair comes up, a lot of property managers do that, where then the rental income would then take care of and of course you put reserves aside for that each month. You don't just strip all of the cash flow out of if it's a cash flowing property, whether it be a medical facility or not. So that situation as to needing extra funds, whether you were a IRA account holder or not, even if you were just a regular, that's something that's always addressed in a joint venture agreement as to how does additional funds get handled.
Okay, Jane, I see the rest of your question. You're saying not specifically investing in the real estate, but investing into the company itself, the business. That would be a private placement type of structure. You're investing into the LLC specifically, so that wouldn't really constitute as a joint venture. That's something you and I can discuss one-on-one on what the rules are when it comes to prohibited transactions and investing into an LLC. Is that what you're trying to do? Is that correct? Okay. Yeah, Jane, feel free to call me and we can discuss it one-on-one. I can provide you my direct phone number. It's 407-519-9172. Okay, perfect. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for all the information. I really appreciate you guys joining us today. Everyone stay safe out there. Feel free to reach out to NewView, or you can reach out to Eric or Barry directly if you have any other questions. Once again, we're here for you no matter what. There are some new policies, but we'll be sending out a message from our CEO, Glenn Mather, pretty soon, just to give you an update on NewView and how everything's the economy and how things are going on, and how investing in alternative assets, might be a good solution for you if you haven't already done so. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks,
Bye-bye
Brian.
now.
See you later.
Bye, everyone.